Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Courtroom Confidential. This is our brand new series called Courtroom Confidential Conversations. It's a series where we want to try to find creators and other people in the true crime space and just have a conversation with them. And we talk a lot about cases on this channel. We talk a lot about trials, but I also want to know about some of the people who are involved in this world. How did they get involved? Who are they? What is their background? What inspires them about true crime? What keeps them motivated? So this is our attempt at doing that and hopefully having some conversations that you all enjoy and perhaps even helping you to learn about some creators on YouTube and podcasts that you may not have heard about before. So today, in our first episode in this series, I'm very excited because our first guest is someone I am a huge, huge fan of and have been for a long time, even long before we started our own channel. She is the host of Grizzly True Crime on YouTube, which was launched in June of 2021, and it has grown by leaps and bounds, and you're about to find out why. If you love deep dives, map time, presentations, case documents, interrogation videos, and watching trials, this is absolutely the place for you. Check out Grizzly True Crime. It has over 370,000 subscribers as of the time that we are recording this, who identify themselves as grizzly bears. And you can see why this community is so tight. So please, without further ado, I would love for you all to please welcome the host, hardest working person on YouTube, and my good friend, Gisela K. Hey, Gisela, how are you?
Hello, Josh. Thank you so much for having me.
I am thrilled to be doing this, and I'm thrilled that we were able to find a time that doesn't have you up in the wee hours of the morning because what time is it your time right now?
For me, it's almost 10 o'clock at night. This is pretty early
Okay.
for me. Usually I'm up till,
Okay.
2, 3 in the morning.
Well, that's what you get when you're covering stuff taking place in the States and you yourself live in Europe. You currently live in Switzerland, right?
That's correct. I live in Switzerland. So, yeah, it's 6 hours ahead of Eastern time.
And I want to get into how you found yourself being a YouTuber who covers primarily American cases and covering them in real time. So you are dealing with all of those time differences. But first, let's get back to even before all of that. You were born and grew up in South Africa, right?
Yes, I was born in Pretoria, South Africa. So, that's the province of Gauteng. That was in 1984. And I was an only child. And yeah, so there's a lot of crime there, which I guess would also be part of why I've always wanted to stay safe.
Oh, interesting. Is that, you think, what may have sparked your kind of interest in this entire world?
I really think so because in South Africa, you really have to be hyper vigilant, as I call it, just to make sure that you are safe, that others are safe. You always have to be aware of your surroundings, situationally aware. So I think it started young for me.
At what age did you move from South Africa? And you didn't originally first land in Switzerland, right?
Yes, correct. So I lived in South Africa for 35 years. And when I think I was 32 or so, I got married to a Swiss man. So his plan was always to
Okay,
head back home. So that's how I ended up in
gotcha.
Switzerland. But we had
Gotcha.
a little time in the Netherlands, about 4.5 years or so. But we're very happy to be now in Switzerland.
How long have you been in Switzerland?
Only since February of 2024.
Okay, good. Because I think when we first met and I first spoke to you, you said you were in the Netherlands.
Yes, correct. Yes.
Yeah, that's where I think you were living then. And then I remember we spoke again and you had made another move. So you're kind of making your way around Europe, but it sounds like Switzerland is where hubby is from. So where you may remain for a while.
I think we'll be here forever now. I'm not leaving. It's such a
Okay.
beautiful country. Yes.
Okay. Good. 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 Well, then tell us how then did this all begin? How did your love for true crime begin? And did it start out always on YouTube or did it start out somewhere else?
I've always been, as I say, so safety conscious. And then a career I had before this was actually, I was an airline pilot for South African Airways in South Africa. And that's
A
obviously
pilot.
very, yes.
Okay. Okay.
So I did that for 9 years. I got a scholarship with South African Airways. So I was one of 8 out of 4,000 candidates chosen, which I think was in 2002. And so, that's like zero to hero within a year and a half. You go from knowing nothing to being in the airline. And so I was very young when I started that. But that's really obviously safety driven. There's checklists, there's multitasking, it's long hours. So, see, I'm just still living the same life. It's long hours
Yeah,
and
right.
obviously, having a lot of responsibility on your shoulders. And so I find it a really easy transition from that to true crime, to cover cases. And I actually find the work that I do now a little bit more important, to spread awareness, to help people raise awareness for domestic violence and red flags and signs to look out for. So I really like what
Where
I'm doing.
you're certainly affecting more people's lives. Your reach in touching more people's lives is, I think, greater. But I imagine the responsibility of having an entire plane full of people's lives in your hands is also a pretty heavy duty thing to carry as well.
Yes, yes. And I started, of course, when I was done with all my training and everything. You do your private pilot's license, commercial pilot's license, then airline transport pilot's license. And then eventually I was flying for the national carrier for the feeder airline when I was 21. When I was
Wow.
24, then I was flying for the national carrier. So I was very young doing that.
God, that seems incredibly young. If I got onto a plane and I saw that my pilot was in her early 20s, I think I white knuckle my seat a little bit more than usual. Do you still, keep your pilot's license active? Do you still fly?
No, it's so incredibly expensive, and the licenses all
Oh,
differ, obviously worldwide. So now in Europe, I'd literally have to start completely over, and I just prefer what I'm doing now.
great. That's a great segue to bring us to this because I see what you're saying about your concerns with safety and everything else, but that is a big transition from being a commercial pilot to now true crime in YouTube. So tell us how that all started. I know that your channel started in 2021, but did your interest in all of this begin before then? Tell us about that journey.
I think I've always been interested in it. I didn't really consume any, like Dateline and the true crime shows as a kid, mostly because my parents didn't really want me to. They were a little bit strict, but that just made me want to explore it more. Of course. So I've always just been interested in it and trying to study, of course, for me, the worst case scenarios, in the unlikely event, goes with the pilot training as well. So I really always was fascinated with studying serial killers because I'm like, how do they get away with this? Over and
Uh-huh.
over and over again, sometimes for decades. I just couldn't believe it. So I studied serial killers and then I decided to write books. So once I quit my airline pilot job, then I decided the airline was going a bit bankrupt. People always ask, why did you quit? Many reasons. That would be one. For me, it was a bit of a safety concern. So I was just like, I'm going to do something else. I'm going to do something new.
Wow.
So I wrote books. I wrote 4 on serial killers, starting with Jeffrey Dahmer, of course, classic serial killer case, and studying that. That turned into a podcast, and eventually that evolved, obviously, to joining YouTube, as most podcasters do. So now I'm adamant. I'm a YouTuber, not a
Yes.
podcaster, because
And
it's been a whole process.
I want to make that clear to everyone too, because you make it clear to me that you are not a podcaster, you are a YouTuber, and there is a difference, folks. Believe me, I know it. It's a entire workload difference too. But tell us about these books. Are these something that are available for purchase? Like, is this something that is still we could go find your Dahmer book?
You can. It's all on Amazon. It's actually on many platforms, but obviously Amazon is the most well known. If anyone's lost, they can go to grizzlytruecrime.com and I put all the links there as well. But I wrote 4 books and then I decided that is a very lonely world. I wanted the engagement with the audience because all you really do after months of hard work and studying really the worst of the worst, it's a little bit taxing on your mental health as well. It's really dark topics. Well, then all you get is a review. Like you get,
Yeah,
are we looking for what, a 4-star, a 5-star? What are we doing?
right.
It didn't feel fulfilling for me. But yes, they can find my books. And I also narrated my own audiobooks, which hands down, that's still the hardest work I've ever done. To get it up to
Uh,
Amazon standards with a USB mic, that was like challenge accepted. So they can hear my audiobooks. They can read the books if they want to download them as well.
Fantastic. And I imagine this is another thing you're making me more curious about. Okay, I understand that you had a passion for it. First of all, do you have any kind of law enforcement background?
I don't. My biological father, who I only saw between the age of 5 and 11, was a police officer. So I
Okay.
guess it's kind of there, but he was also a little bit neglectful. So I didn't get to
Yeah.
see much of it. I was left in the car a lot and always wondering, what is he doing in there? Like, I want to know. I want to be a little detective, you know? And just
Yeah.
the political climate in South Africa at the time didn't really allow for that type of career choice by the time I was all grown up. So I've always wanted to be. I used to like look for clues if there's any crime to solve, if there's anyone breaking in somewhere, like sketch them, you know? Like this is what they look like, this is what they were wearing,
Right.
but you know, so
You're
I've
putting up
always wanted
posters
to.
in your neighborhood.
Exactly, yeah. Missing. Do you see this? Like they broke into
Yeah.
our house 11 times in 1 year in
Oh
Pretoria,
my
South
God.
Africa, when I was about 14 years old. And every time I was like taking pictures, you know, of their fingerprints that they left, or all kinds of forensics I was doing, you know, as a teenager. And the
You had
cops were
your
like,
y you
what?
had your junior forensic kit out and you were dusting
Yeah.
for prints? I love that. Wow,
Yes.
when you talk about dealing with crime though, 11 times in 1 year, that's tremendous.
That
Yeah,
was
I can
scary.
understand.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so no formal training, you just had a passion for it, but writing a book, I can imagine, is a tremendous amount of research you had to put into it. Tell us about that.
It was so much research and so many hours of working. And I must say, the writing the book is the one thing, but the next step would be yes, the audio books. I think that was even more difficult to figure out exactly how to do that. And anyway, but yeah, sitting there for months, you know, just researching from the beginning of the case, you know, because it was serial killer. So who was the first victim? And I wanted to find out who the victims were. Like who were they? Where were they born? What's their background? And really dig up as much information as possible because I couldn't stand that, especially with serial killers. It's like
Yeah.
Jeffrey Dahmer's victims. I'm like, but they each had a name and they each had
Right.
a life and family. So that I found was the most time consuming, but also the most worthwhile.
Did you actually, go as far as trying to interview some of their family members or anything?
I didn't because I'm a little shy. I was more shy then.
Yeah,
I'm less
yeah,
shy now that I've been on
right.
YouTube for a while. But yeah, I didn't. I just did as much internet research as I possibly could, just digging up any archives or anything I could find or pictures, things like that.
I can imagine that would be daunting, to just reach out to someone, you don't know who they are, and also these are people who have probably had reporters and everything harass them for decades, and so I can understand all of that. Um, well, that you must be then experts on each of these books. Tell us again the 4 books that you wrote?
So the four that I wrote was about Jeffrey Dahmer and then Eileen Wernos, Ted Bundy, and John Wayne Gacy.
Yeah, and those are ones that have a lot of information out there, so you're really, putting in the work. Tell us then when you saw because I wanna get into, at some point, talk to you about this Menendez series that just came out, but the same creators did the Dahmer series that a lot of people watched. I watched, I thought it was fascinating. I'm not anywhere near an expert on that case, but you are, I think. What did you think? Was it kind of an accurate portrayal, or were you driven nuts by it?
I was driven a little nuts by it, especially because, again, they were kind of glorifying the serial killer, you know,
Yeah,
making Jeffrey Dahmer look ultra sexy and cool. And that is really the opposite of what I'm trying to do. You
yeah,
know, as much as the names for my books would be, you know, all the cool names they were given, that would be because that's how people know them. But my mission was okay, that's the cover, but now we're going to dive into this topic of who were the victims, like
yeah,
what did this person do to these people. So I found it a little bit, it's very dark psychologically, extremely. They really need to put a big trigger warning up there, but also just uncool how they made him so appealing. I mean, it
yeah,
really
glorified.
enables hybristophilia, you know, in society, and women are just these huge fans of them, and that just is part of the problem as well.
Yeah, yeah, and that is one thing that I do really appreciate about your channel and your community is that you really are victim centric and make sure to never forget them, and I that that is something that I think does go miss sometimes in the true crime world, so I appreciate you, for always reminding us of that. Okay, so now you're on this journey. You've written these books, and you said that then those books evolved into podcasting. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I found that writing these books and putting in all that work and everything, I really wanted to talk to people about it, you know, and I realized, oh my, like books are really you're just looking at reviews. You know, people are just rating your book. So it's not really the engagement that you want or the conversation or raising awareness on certain topics. So I found that aspect had a bit of a void. So I started a podcast. It was called Grizzly Books True Crime because it was based on the book. So my YouTube channel actually also started with that name. That's Grizzly True Crime. And so I started a podcast, and that was so much more fulfilling. And of course, naturally, that turned into a YouTube channel. So it's even better now because it's live streams and people are engaging live with me, watching trials live with me on these topics. So yeah, that's how I ended up there.
So you said you told us earlier that you're a little bit shy. The you first get into this field that is very solitary, writing and researching. You're in front of a computer, and you could lose track if there's even anyone in the room. What was it daunting at first to get into podcasting and then YouTube? Now you're in front of the whole world and you do live broadcasting on YouTube where you've got thousands of people watching you all at once. Tell us the evolution, how Gisela goes from in her room typing away to all of a sudden in front of all thousands of people live on YouTube.
I mean, I'm kind of used to just diving into the deep end, just like,
Yeah.
okay, this is a challenge and accept it because at the end, you need to know what you want, right? So at the end of the day, I wanted to talk to people about this and, raise awareness for many topics, including how to stay safe, how to not go through this horrifying trauma that so many people go through. So to break those cycles and things. So I started with a podcast, and of course, that had some engagement, but again, it's like comments after the show. I found,
Right.
okay, so it's kind of like when you make videos and there's comments after a video. I really like the live engagement. So when I started a YouTube channel, again, I just jumped into the deep end and decided I'm going live Monday to Thursday every single night. So I
Wow.
just I just started like that, and wow, I started talking about serial killers, the Chris Watts case, of course, and then Gabby Petito went missing. And my audience asked me, please, please, can you cover this with your presentations and your map time and your bullet points? You'd be so good at this. I'm like, I don't know. I don't cover like active cases. And I started covering it. And of course, I've never looked back.
Yeah, that was a big case, and I do know that you were kind of one of the, point of the spear, YouTubers talking about that case and that whole investigation. So is that for real that you went all of a sudden you're like, "I'm doing YouTube," and you were live 5 days a week?
Literally. Literally,
Wow,
I was like, okay, this is what I'm doing. I've decided. So I think about things for a long time, but once I make a decision, I'm like, that's what I'm doing.
I
So
like it.
that's the way to do it. That's how we're going to talk to everyone. And it was so great because people are so helpful and they want to be so proactive. So they want to share the missing persons flyer. They want to share information on email and say, hey, you need to check this out. Or, it's really great.
One of the we invited people when we told them we were going to be doing this interview with you, and I will say that people who follow Courtroom Confidential, nearly all of them follow Grizzly True Crime. And if they don't, I encourage you to go ahead and do that. But one question that we did get from someone is that people are amazed and applauding the growth that you've had on your channel so quickly. What do you attribute that to? I have a suspicion hearing you speak about it and your passion about it and the deep dive and your interest in having feedback. What do you attribute that growth to?
I think it could be, yes, my passion, determination. I mean, my husband and I don't have kids, so I can also go live at the drop of a hat. And I really enjoy that. I'm always like running through the house. I'm going live. Something has happened. There's a press conference or something. So being available like that really helps people know that if something's happening, I'm probably going to be talking about it with them. Right. So I know they like that as well. But I must say, I give a lot of credit to my manager. So she's kind of like a PR manager. She just helps me navigate this YouTube world.
Yeah.
It's so scary sometimes. There can be a lot of drama, a lot of things behind the scenes. So I find that having her is like an anchor, like a mental anchor, and then also just strategizing with her and talking about things, it really helps keep me going because it can really be a very daunting world.
Oh, absolutely. I can say that firsthand myself, having tried to get into this in the last few months. It is a very daunting world. But you bring up something I did want to ask you about, which is kind of your team. So you've mentioned hubby. I don't want to get too much into your personal life, but I'm curious, does he have any background in true crime? Does he have an interest in this stuff? What does he think about this whole world that in your own words, jumped into the deep end on?
So he does not have an interest in true crime. He just happens to hear things. But I'm like, can I tell you something?
Yeah, right.
It's like the whole breakdown of a case. He's like, oh my word. He's actually a software engineer, and we
Okay.
both met in the airline that I told you about earlier. We met at South African Airways. He was actually a cabin crew, and I was a pilot, and we just became the best of friends. And so I think he's really great as well at helping me sometimes if there's something like technical that goes wrong, or so. But yeah, true crime is not his thing. He thinks this world is absolutely crazy. And if he sees me running through the house, at 2 in the morning, being like, I'm going live. He's
That's
always like,
awesome.
oh my goodness. Okay. Like, what is this? I'm like, this is the life of a journalist now. Okay.
I love that. My wife also did not have any kind of background in true crime at all. She was, when we met, she was a publicist for one of the major movie studios. And as we decided to get it, it was actually her idea to say, let's start our own channel. And so she came
Nice.
at it from kind of the marketing publicity side of things. But now it's so funny because I'll get home because I still have my day job and I'll get home and she's got her headphones on and she's been listening to a trial all day long and she goes, you'll never believe what happened, and try to outline the whole thing for me. So she's much like your husband, where she was kind of thrust into it, but now she kind of I would say she has her own independent passion in the whole thing. But you've got hubby who kind of helps out with the tech side of things sometimes, and mainly it sounds like he helps out by just letting you do your thing. You've got
Yes.
your manager. Is there anybody else on your team that helps you out?
And then I have the best moderators. We have such a great team of moderators. There's only six of them. I started with a bit of a bigger group, and now we've just got the best of the best. So they really help keep the Grizzly standard. we
Yeah.
say we say keep it Grizzly, and they just keep the chat kind and the tone okay. And I just really find that's very important for the families of the victims. Because sometimes people will just say whatever they want to say on the internet, and we really try to just guide them to just please be kind. The family's watching, so I find that the moderators have helped my channel build a lot of trust with family members. So they're always reaching out saying thank you so much that the chat's so kind and all of that.
That's another thing I really value about your channel and your community is that I'm trying to figure out a nice way to say this, but you can find a lot of other channels that do not care as much about their community and the engagement with that, or fostering the kind of safe place for people to talk about these things that is respectful of victims and everything else. So I applaud you on all of that. Did you find, because when you start to get as popular as you are on YouTube, I imagine that it becomes more difficult to kind of control that and not let things get out of hand. Was that something you found to be difficult?
It is a daily challenge, especially if there's thousands of people watching a live trial for many, many hours. I mean, we only have six volunteer moderators, so they volunteer their time. They're so passionate about it as well. And I'm so proud of them, but it really does get difficult. So they do their very best. Of course, we can't like control all of it, but then I just verbally guide everyone. Remember, families are watching. Remember, witnesses watch the
Yeah.
replays afterwards as well. Like, there's no point in attacking people's personal appearance mocking them or something. They're there to help fight for justice for the victim. So I just
No.
gently remind everyone it's still the internet. They could still have the opinion, but we definitely want to keep things with a certain tone.
I have a question for you, and I'm just thinking of it now. But one thing that's amazing to me sometimes, and it's hard to predict, but there are cases that, for some reason, become very polarizing to people. And a lot of the cases, everybody seems to be on the same side. They either think someone, usually they think someone's very guilty, but every once in a while you'll find a case and it's completely split, and you've got a faction who believes the person's completely innocent and getting railroad, and a faction who thinks that 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 group of people is just being fooled by the defense, and that this person's truly guilty. One of the cases that comes to mind is the Karen Reed case, and I don't want to get into it, but it's one of those cases where people get passionate about it. And though I value the passion, it can lead to um, unfriendly discourse, I guess is the way I'll put it. Have you dealt with that? Have you had to navigate through that? What are your thoughts on those types of cases?
I have. So I haven't covered the Karen Reed case as much as I watched a lot of what was going on, but I
Hmm.
would say the Ashley Benefield trial was like that. The
Yes.
Delphi case is like that. Madeline Soto's case is like that a bit. So that is difficult. But then I just remind everyone, well, all opinions are welcome. Of course, all opinions are welcome. Just try not to be combative with each other. Like, don't fight each other over it. Have your opinion, and you don't have to convince someone either. If
Yeah.
you're convinced in your own mind, then that's okay. Then share your opinion and just be calm, because some people get so defensive and they
Yeah.
really want to convince others, but there's no reason to do that.
Yeah. It also seems to me to almost become a bit of a spectator sport. And it's sometimes you have to remind folks that, hey, this is not a drama. Like these are people's actual lives playing out in court here. And maybe we dial it back a bit when we start name calling or something like that, as passionately as we might feel. Um, all right. I do want to talk about some of the cases that you have covered recently and that you are passionate about. But one of my first questions was, you are in Switzerland, that there is a time difference, but you do a lot of the cases you have mentioned are in the US, are American cases. I feel like I have an idea of why that might be, but why do you think that is?
I think it's just the amazing transparency that you guys have in the US because, for example, in South Africa, we don't have mugshots. You do not see
Interesting.
mugshots. You can't get
Yeah.
your hands on documents. It's just less access. Only high profile cases might have live streams for trials like Oscar Pistorius or something, but we don't get to see much. And also in Switzerland, oh my word, they are so the privacy concerns even around the victim and the perpetrator. There was a recent case in Switzerland. The victim's name was changed in the media initially until people figured out who she was because it was a
Wow.
fairly popular lady. But the perpetrator's real name is still not known to this day. He's known as
Wow.
Thomas in the media. And I'm like, whoa, that's so different. And they blur out the faces of the victims and they do not show pictures of the perpetrator. I'm like, that is very different. So, in America, I mean, you guys have press conferences, you've got mugshots, you've got documents, the FOIA requests, of course. I mean, that's amazing to get all that information to study it, to really deep dive the cases, and then of course the live trials as well.
Yeah.
Generally,
Yeah, that's the point I was thinking of, and I'm so glad that you were able to articulate it that way because we even tend to get a little bit spoiled about it here. I think that when a case isn't broadcast, we're all up in arms. How could they not allow cameras in the courtroom? Try moving to a different country where they don't even I had no idea that they don't even show the people's face in the media and they change the
yes,
names. That's incredible. So yeah, we're
yes,
we're pretty spoiled the fact that we have live broadcasts of what's taking place inside of these courtrooms. But I and
yes.
I think you feel the same way. More transparency is good.
Yes, absolutely. I prefer it because then I think that, we can learn from it, as I
Yeah.
say. But I must say, obviously in Switzerland, the crime stats are so low. I,
Yeah.
I don't know if that's why, but I just really like learning lessons from all these cases and having access to so much information. I think it's really great.
Yeah. All right, talk to us about maybe this doesn't exist, but I was going to say talk to us about a typical day for you. Do you wake up and have your day planned out of what you're going to talk about, or is it just kind of responding to what's in the news?
I think it's more accurate to say responding what's in the news because as much as I actually like planning things and I like structure, this world just doesn't quite work like that. When you think tomorrow, this is what I'm going to be doing, no, something else will happen. There'll be a Rex Heuermann related press conference, or someone would have escaped to prison, or I don't know, something's happening that you're like, okay, I'll be doing that. So I try to just have a plan, but know that it's actually really plan B because something else is probably going to happen and it could happen at any given hour. I mean, the worst is verdict watch for me.
Mm.
Verdict watch for these trials. For me, I'm up all night, waiting to see, okay, is the court going to close for the day? Do they send the jurors home? Do they come back? So yeah, I've always got one eye open, really.
And about how many hours ahead? 8 hours ahead of us, by the way, folks. So applaud her efforts that when she's saying staying up, she really means it. She's up until the middle of the night for her to see if a court is going to have a decision on something. Um, Tell us about how you decide the cases that you're going to follow, because another thing I appreciate about your channel is that you don't, there will sometimes be cases that are capturing the news and everybody seems to be covering them. But you'll do that, but you also kind of pick your own cases that you're like, I'm really interested in this one and I'm going to do a deep dive on that one, even though it may not be the biggest headline grabbing case of the day. How do you decide on that?
So I normally have lots of conversations, of course, with my manager about things, especially when I want to go like the other way, just something that's a little bit less popular because you always wonder, will the audience even want to watch it? And it's important for engagement and to do that, to talk about it with them. Will they be interested? Because as much as I'm a bit of a control freak, just a
Yeah.
bit, the audience really controls what you do.
Yes.
It's up to them what they want to watch. If you are making content that they don't really want to watch, they just won't watch it. So I would like to have that engagement with them to see justice for the victim together and have that fight together. And so it's always just communicating, just strategizing, communicating what's happening right now. I mean, right now at this time of this recording, of course, there's the Sarah Boone trial and there's the Leilani Simon trial. So that was difficult. But I've deep dived Quentin Simon's case so much, both of them really, that I thought, well, I know everyone's going to cover Sarah Boone's trial. So let me cover this one, you know?
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about that one, because I didn't want to spend all of our conversation talking about current cases, but this is a case that you're passionate about, and it is a case that not a lot of people are talking about. I know it's been on court TV a little bit, but tell us about that case because it is a really tragic case that's worth some attention.
It really is. It's this 22-year-old mother in 2022 that had three kids from three different dads, and she didn't like the middle child. She told the babysitter, I just have no connection with him. She safari searched like, is it normal for a mother to have resentment towards a child because of how she feels about the dad? I mean, like, there's so much there, just so much anger towards this little boy. And he was only 20 months old, and his name was Quentin Simon. And we still don't know exactly how he died. That's what the state said in the opening statements during this trial. They're not exactly sure what she did to him, but she threw him in the dumpster. She literally drove 2.7 miles from her house and threw her child in the dumpster. And he was found, this was in October of 2022. He was found, his partial remains were found in November of 2022. And while the volunteers were out there searching and raking through all that trash, looking just for any sign of Quentin, Leilani Simon and her mother were having Patron shots and partying and flirting with waiters and fighting with YouTubers. It was like unbelievable to see that contrast. So, Quentin, it's just such a sad case. This little sweet little boy,
20 months
innocent,
old, right?
20 months old,
Just a
was
toddler.
murdered and thrown in the
Wow.
trash. Wow. By his own mother.
Uh, I
Yeah.
have a I have my middle child is about that age right now, and the
Wow.
idea of anybody treating this innocent little being in any way that doesn't, isn't showing them complete and utter love, it really pushes me over the edge. Uh, so there's a couple of points about this case that have fascinated me, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts. And I want to know too how you think the prosecution is doing. But the prosecution has said that they don't know, and you pointed this out. They do not know how the boy lost his life, and that always creates a question as far as jurors are concerned because there's always that lingering question of whether or not the defendant was involved. The other thing in this case that was fascinating to me is she created this video and she talks about the video reads like it's a video where she's talking about self-harm and maybe taking her own life. Tell us about that. How has that played out? How do you, I guess overall, how do you feel the prosecution is doing?
I've honestly not seen prosecution do as well as this one. They're doing so
Okay.
well with let's say, with the little they have, besides the 15 counts of lying to police. I think they've proven that beyond a reasonable doubt. But the way they're doing the timelines, they're showing maps, they're showing videos, all the surveillance videos, and so many police interviews. I really think that it would, at the end of the day, in the juror's mind, likely be a case of like Occam's razor. I mean, it's, if you tie it all together, it makes sense that she's the one who did something to Quentin. And I'm still
Yeah.
waiting for any evidence of what she did because in the indictment, they talk about that she assaulted him with a blunt object. So I'm not too sure where they came up with that. But so many charges, and they've proven so much already, even though it is tricky. I think they're doing really well. I think the jury can see Leilani for who she is, even in the courtroom. So that dramatic video that you're talking about was filmed in August of 2022, and Quentin died on October 5th of 2022. So it was this very dramatic lashing out at her current boyfriend at the time. So they're obviously no
Yeah.
longer together, but at the time, she's an attention seeker,
Yeah.
and they say that the strain on the relationship that she was expressing, she took it out on this little boy.
And it was apparently drug fueled too, right? Don't they believe that she went out and got drugs that
Yes.
evening, and that probably is what ignited some sort of violent response towards this little innocent boy?
Yes, so the babysitter and the babysitter's daughter testified and said that she was mean to that little boy and not the other two kids all the time. She pushed him into the pool, she pushed him down the stairs, like she did all sorts of things that was already horrible. Then, in police interviews, Leilani Simon said that when she sniffs certain things, she's aggressive, that she could just snap in a second. So she said it herself, like she's one of those defendants that really sunk her own ship. Everything she said is, if she just said, I want a lawyer, I don't know what kind of case they would really have. All her talking is what is going to sink her in the end.
Which is true in a lot of cases. It had in a lot of cases had people just said nothing, they it would have made the prosecution's case that much more difficult. Well, this
Yes.
case just absolutely breaks my heart. Again, the loss of anyone's life is horrible, but when you're talking about innocent little toddlers who all they want in the whole world is just to give you a big hug, it just breaks my heart. Um,
Yes.
what case? I just got a few more questions for you. Thank you so much for all the time that you've taken with us. I've really enjoyed this
It's a
conversation.
pleasure. Yes.
But tell us about what case. Do you have any cases that still stick with you to this day? You've been doing this long enough. That are there ones that are like that one is still a rough one for me?
I really think I could say all cases because I deep dive them so much. They get under your skin a little bit. You get really close, and especially when you're in contact with the family members. But I must say, like Gannon Stauch's case and Letitia Stauch, that horrible stepmother who's in prison for the rest of her life. That one really sticks with me. That was also the first trial that I ever covered live. So I think that's also part of it. And, just seeing the live reactions of everyone and just handling the stress of all of that, covering a trial live for the first time and then the weight of the case. It was just that one I'll never forget. And then, of course, Gabby Petito's and all the cases involving children, like you just said, when it's
Yeah,
children that are harmed. Oh, man, those really stick with me.
yeah, yeah. Me too. Like I said, I mean, there's not much more I can add to what I've already said, but it's the idea of something so innocent, and especially when it's the people in the world that they trusted that are the ones that are hurting them. That really is hard to deal with, and really
Yes.
difficult subject matter to get through. How about how about a case that are there any cases coming up or something that isn't getting enough attention that you wish was getting more attention? What's on the radar for you?
As I say, I take it day by day and week by week. But one case that I constantly look at is, of course, Daniel Robinson's case. He's a geologist who went missing. And, it's been, I think it's 2.5 years now of just his father, David Robinson, just constantly putting the flyers out there and the information out there. And that one really makes me sad. When someone's missing and
Yeah,
there's just no answers as if they just vanished. Oh, that really bothers me. So I really always try to share the cases and the flyers and keep those cases alive. So that obviously the Delphi trial, we want to see what's going to happen with that. That one will probably always bother everyone because of the
yeah,
lack of transparency. We have no idea what's really happening there. Of course, there's people taking notes, which is so great to hear from that. But it's just unfortunate in that one. It really deserves transparency. So I think I'm just keeping an eye on all of the cases, like let's say for the next month or so that are happening. There's that James Craig, the Colorado dentist who poisoned his
yes,
wife, her
yes.
smoothies with cyanide and things. So I'm keeping an eye on that one as well. His trial date keeps on moving, forward. But that one I also deep dived, and I'm very interested to see what happens there as well.
Yeah, that one will be a fascinating one. I did a little bit of a deep dive into that myself, and it's incredible because he's carrying on in this affair, and then the lover has no idea, and then she shows up when the funeral's taking place. It's all just drama. And here's a guy that by all outward appearances had everything in the world going for him, and he decides to it wasn't enough, and he's going to take his wife's life. It's really, really tragic stuff.
Yeah.
How about uh, what's next? You've done the books, you've done podcasts, you're conquering YouTube. Do you have plans that you can share with us, or is it just kind of continue to grow the Grizzly community? And before you answer that, I want to make sure to say, I always know when a Grizzly's in the chat because they leave the little bear icon, and it's like a whole gang showed up, and they're all wonderful people, and I always love hearing from them. But your community is really kind of unparalleled in its self-identifying togetherness.
Yes, that's why also I wanted a mascot so that we can be identified where we go, you know?
That's great.
So yeah, we are the Grizzlies and people know when we're in chat.
That's
So
true.
that is quite funny. So you will probably see lots of bears on this episode. I hope
I'm
so. I'm gonna
sure
send
we
them all
will. I
over.
look forward to it.
Yes. So the question is what's next for me, right? That's what you would like to know?
Yes, please.
So I was recently featured in a BBC documentary, and I was, I told you I'm shy.
Yeah.
So I was like, I actually said no to them so many times. I'm like, no way, I can't do that. Can't do. And they said, we'll fly to you. Just you stay in your house, and we'll come there and set it all up, and it'll be fine. So I'm like, okay. Considered it. Conversation kept going, and now I featured in that a little bit. So I don't know. I feel like now I'm ready for documentary. So who knows? I don't know what is next, but I'm more open to opportunities. I mean, like this one, I'm so grateful. I've always told people you can ask all your true crime friends. I say, no, sorry, I don't talk about myself. I don't like the spotlight on me. Can't do an interview. So you see, now I've started something. So I'm very excited for more interviews or being in a documentary or just I don't know, just hopping on the news or just having my say. I really enjoy it.
That's fantastic. Well, you heard it, everybody. She's available for documentaries now. You're going to
Oh
start
dear.
getting requests all the time. Well, Gisela, this has been fantastic. I really enjoyed this. I learned a lot. I'm sure that our subscribers have learned a lot. Um, Again, I just wanted to tell you how much I appreciate you and all your support. You've always been such a big supporter and fan of our channel and helping kind of point people in our direction. So I truly, truly do appreciate that. Tell our viewers though, and everyone, where can they find out more about you? Where should they go? Where can they find the latest episode?
I think one of the best places to find me is, of course, on YouTube, so on Grizzly True Crime. But on my website, grizzlytruecrime.com, I do have an About Me page if they want to just read a little bit more about me or see pictures of the cats. Everyone's always wondering, can we see pictures of the cats? My husband doesn't want to be shown or be on camera or anything like that. He's even more shy than me. So, but they can find things there. They can find my books over there and just all the links that they'd be looking for.
Fantastic. Thank you again. This has been wonderful. I appreciate it, and I'll be talking with you soon.
Yes, thank you so much.
Absolutely. All right, you guys, thank you so much for being here, for being a part of this brand new series that we're trying to bring to you. We have other guests that we have lined up. If you want to hear from someone in particular, please let us know in the comments who you're looking forward to hearing from. But in the meantime, please make sure that you check out Grizzly True Crime. It's well worth it. And thank you again for joining us on this latest episode of Courtroom Confidential Conversations.